Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to explore the story of a text that's absolutely central to more than a billion people on this planet. And here's the thing, its very name tells you something incredibly unique about its nature. I mean, think about it for a second. You've got the Gospel of John. Pretty obvious, it's named for its author, John. Then there's the book of Genesis, which literally means origin, so it's named for its content. See a pattern here? The names are basically labels on the cover, telling you what's inside. But what if a book wasn't named for what it is, but for how you're supposed to experience it? That's exactly what we see with the central scripture of Islam. It takes a totally different path. So yeah, let's dive in and see what that's all about. And this right here, this is the key to the whole thing. The word Qur'an comes from the Arabic verb qara'a, which means to recite. So before a single word was ever etched onto parchment or stone, the Qur'an was a sound. It was a voice. It was something meant to be heard, a recitation. And if you can grasp that one idea, you're on your way to understanding its entire story. All right, so this whole thing didn't just drop out of the sky all at once. Nope, it was a gradual, unfolding message that came down over 23 years. Think about that, more than 2 decades, from 610 to 632 CE. And this process, it's really cool. It's split into 2 main phases that pretty much mirror the journey of the early Muslim community. Okay. Now this is fascinating. You can literally see the revelation adapting in real time. When the community was in Mecca, the verses were short, they were powerful, really poetic. They focused on these big core ideas like the oneness of God and the afterlife. It makes sense, right? This was a society that loved poetry. But then they moved to Medina, and boom, the style completely shifts. The verses get longer, way more detailed, and they start laying down the law, so to speak. We're talking justice, family, how to run a whole society. So you might be wondering, okay, if this was mostly an oral thing, spread out over 23 years, how on earth was it perfectly preserved? How do you keep it from getting changed? Well, this is where the early Muslims had this just brilliant system. It was this 2-pronged approach. Think of it like a double helix, you know? Each strand was constantly checking and balancing the other, making sure not a single word was lost or altered. And here's how that dual lock system worked. On one hand, you had mass memorization. We're talking thousands of people who knew the entire text by heart, so the words were literally alive in their hearts. This protected the written text from any mistake a scribe might make. And on the other hand, you had people writing verses down on whatever they could find, parchment, flat stones, even bones. This written record protected the memorized text from, being forgotten. It's an amazing system of checks and balances. But then a crisis hits. A major battle happens, and a lot of these original memorizers, the people who had it all in their heads, are killed. Suddenly, there's this very real fear that parts of the recitation could be lost forever. So, the first caliph, Abu Bakr, orders all those scattered written bits and pieces to be gathered up into one single book. Then, a little while later, under the third caliph, Uthman, they took it a step further. To make sure different dialects didn't cause confusion, they created one official standardized version. And that version, the Uthmanic Codex, became the definitive text that was copied and sent everywhere. So, there you have it. That's the traditional story of how the Quran was preserved. And you've got to admit, it's a pretty rock-solid system. But of course, the big question for us today is, does the science back it up? How does this 1,400-year-old story hold up when you put it under a modern microscope? And for a long, long time, this was really just a question of faith and combing through historical records. But lately, in just the last few years, the answers have started popping up in some pretty unexpected places. Think climate-controlled labs, dusty university archives. The evidence is coming from some of the oldest manuscripts on the planet. And this is just incredible. Get this. In 2015, the University of Birmingham decided to run a radiocarbon dating test on a Quran manuscript they had in their collection, and the results were mind-blowing. The date came back as between 568 and 645 CE. Now, just look at this timeline. That means the animal whose skin was used for this parchment was alive during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad himself. This is huge. It's powerful physical proof that the text was being written down right from the very, very beginning. And look, the Birmingham manuscript isn't some one-off fluke. It's not alone. In Yemen, they found what's called the Sana'a palimpsest, dated before 671 CE. And what's really cool is that its lower text, the part that was erased, actually shows some of the early dialect differences that the tradition says Uthman's version standardized. It's like a smoking gun confirming the story. You've got other fragments in Germany, France, Russia, and all this growing physical evidence is pointing to the exact same conclusion. The Quran that people read today is incredibly, remarkably consistent with these ancient copies from the earliest days of Islam.
Okay, so the Quran doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It actually talks a lot about its relationship with the scriptures that came before it, like the Torah and the Gospel. It sees itself as the final piece of the puzzle, the last link in this long chain of divine messages. And it all really boils down to this one powerful Arabic word the Quran uses to describe itself, muhaymin. It's a tricky word to translate directly, but it means all of these things at once: a guardian, a safeguard, a witness, and a final criterion. So the idea here is that the Quran's job is to be that final yardstick, a tool to sort of sift through everything that came before and protect that original core divine message.
So, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, from the Quranic point of view, it confirms the original revelation, the pure message that it says was given to prophets like Moses and Jesus. But, and this is a key distinction, it does not confirm the modern Bible as a whole. It sees the Bible we have today as a collection of human biographies and interpretations mixed in with parts of that original message. So the Quran's role, as that muhaymin, is to step in and say, okay, this part is the original truth, and this part is human addition. It acts as a witness and a guardian of that original core. So when you put all of this together, this journey from a spoken recitation to a scientifically verified manuscript, from being a criterion for past books to a guide for daily life, it all starts to make sense why, for Muslims, the Quran is so much more than just some old historical book. It's a living, breathing text. And this is where we really come full circle. Remember how we started with the name meaning recitation? Well, that original function is still right at the heart of everything. It's recited out loud in the 5 daily prayers. Its ideas guide everything from how you do business to how you raise a family. And its words, the very shape of the letters, have inspired this incredible tradition of sacred art, especially calligraphy, which is seen as the ultimate way to visually represent the divine word. So from its oral beginnings in a cave to the scientific proof sitting in a modern library, the journey of the Quran is a remarkable story of preservation. It's both a recitation you hear every day in prayer and a criterion that shapes identity. Its influence is constantly unfolding, and it leaves us with a pretty big question. How does a text that is both a recitation and a criterion continue to shape the dialogue and identity of over 1 billion people today?